For a historic 1,316 days, Roman Reigns was the WWE Universal Champion. For even longer, he was the head of the table, the tribal chief, the patriarch of the most dominant faction in modern professional wrestling. The Bloodline, in its prime, was an unstoppable force, a dynasty built on family, loyalty, and the acknowledgement of its chief. They held all the gold, and they had all the power. But today, that bloodline is dead. It wasn't conquered by an outside enemy or brought down by a rival. It was poisoned from within. What we see now is a hollowed-out shell, a family fractured and split into a bitter civil war. And the architect of this destruction, the man who's to blame for its spectacular collapse, is the same man who built it, Roman Reigns. How did the guy who demanded loyalty become the very reason for betrayal? How did the head of the table end up with no one left to serve? This is the story of how Roman's own choices, paranoia, and hubris became the poison that killed his own family. To understand the end, you have to go back to the very beginning. The foundation of the bloodline wasn't built on love or respect. It was forged in the fires of manipulation and brutal emotional torment. When Roman Reigns returned as the tribal chief in 2020, his first target wasn't an enemy, but his own cousin, Jey Uso. This wasn't some friendly rivalry. This was a brutal lesson in psychological warfare. Reigns didn't just want to beat Jey at Clash of Champions. He wanted to break him. He needed Jey to acknowledge him as superior, as the provider, as the head of their entire dynasty. The whole thing culminated in a barbaric I quit hell in a cell match that felt more like a scene from a mob movie than a wrestling bout. Roman didn't win by making Jey quit. He won by torturing Jey's injured brother, Jimmy, forcing Jey to say, "I quit," just to save his twin from more pain. This was the original sin. Jey Uso fell in line, not out of belief, but because he was emotionally beaten into submission. Roman didn't earn his loyalty, he ripped it out of him. He established from day one that love was conditional, and that failing to acknowledge him meant punishment not just for you, but for the family you cared about most. He poisoned the well from the very start, creating a leader whose power was based on fear, not fellowship. This one act set the stage for every betrayal that followed. With Jey in line, the bloodline began its conquest. But Roman's paranoia and his impossible standards for loyalty created an environment where no one was ever truly safe. And no one felt that impossible standard more than Sami Zayn. For months, Sami, the honorary Uso, was the most devoted soldier the bloodline had. He took beatings, cheated to help them win, and sang their praises to anyone who would listen. He just desperately wanted to be part of the family. And for a little while, it looked like he was. He was even gifted his own honorary Uso t-shirt in a genuinely heartwarming moment. But Roman never saw him as an equal. He was a tool, a useful pawn in the tribal chief's game. Roman would constantly test Sami's loyalty, gaslight him, and question his every move, keeping him always walking on eggshells. The message was always clear. Because you're not blood, your place here is temporary. It all blew up at the 2023 Royal Rumble. After Roman beat Kevin Owens, he ordered the entire bloodline to assault Owens, Sami's oldest friend. He then handed Sami a steel chair and demanded he deliver the final blow. Sami had to choose. After a moment of intense conflict, he chose his conscience, smashing the chair across Roman Reigns' back instead. The crowd erupted. It was the first major crack in the bloodline's armor, and it came from the man who had been its most loyal follower. Roman's inability to genuinely accept his most devoted disciple proved the family was just a hierarchy, and anyone not born into it was ultimately expendable. Jey Uso, who had bonded with Sami, walked away in disgust, planting the seeds for his own rebellion. Sami's betrayal opened the floodgates. It showed the rest of the bloodline that defiance was actually possible. For Jey and Jimmy Uso, who had put up with years of Roman's mind games and disrespect, it was a turning point. Despite being one of the greatest tag teams of a generation, they were constantly reminded that they were just soldiers, not generals. The final straw came when the disrespect became too much to bear. The Usos finally broke free, leading to a bloodline civil war at Money in the Bank. In that match, Jey Uso did the unthinkable. He became the first person in nearly 4 years to pin Roman Reigns. It wasn't just a loss for Roman. It was the shattering of his invincible aura. It was the definitive statement that his cousins were no longer his pawns. They were his equals, and now his enemies. The family Roman claimed to be protecting was now in a bitter public war with itself. This intricate story has captivated fans for years, with countless twists and turns. Everyone has a moment where they felt the story peaked. Let me know in the comments below, what was the single moment you knew the original Bloodline was doomed to fail? Was it Sami's chair shot, Jey's super kick, or something else entirely? After Roman Reigns lost his undisputed WWE Universal Championship, he took an indefinite hiatus. But in his absence, the empire he built didn't just crumble. Instead, the power vacuum he left was filled by the one man who had learned Roman's lessons of brutality all too well, Solo Sikoa. Solo, the silent enforcer, had been Roman's most ruthless weapon. With Roman gone, Solo stepped into the void, seizing control of the family. His version of the Bloodline is different. He violently exiled his own brother, Jey Uso, and recruited a new, more vicious crew, including Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. This isn't the family dynasty Roman built. This is a street gang, a cold and calculated organization. Paul Heyman, the original wise man, looks more like a hostage than a conciliere under this new regime. Solo isn't just leading. He's ruling through pure fear, an even more extreme version of the tactics Roman used to gain power. The monster Roman created to protect his throne has now claimed it for himself. When Roman Reigns made his shocking return in the summer of 2025, he didn't come back to a kingdom waiting for its king. He returned to a house divided, a family in the middle of a full-blown civil war. His first major act wasn't to reclaim his throne, but to form a temporary truce with his estranged cousin, Jey Uso, at SummerSlam, born from a common enemy. The very faction he created to elevate his family name is now split in two, with both sides claiming to be the true Bloodline. He's now locked in a bitter feud with Solo Sikoa, the enforcer he personally recruited and molded. The man who demanded acknowledgement at all costs now finds himself challenged by a reflection of his own worst impulses. The family is broken beyond repair, with members forced to choose a side between the original chief and the new one. This is the ultimate consequence of Roman's reign. The table he built is now shattered, and his family is fighting over the broken pieces. So, is the Bloodline dead? Yes. The original Bloodline, the one built on the promise of family, dominance, and acknowledgement, is gone forever. It's been replaced by a bitter civil war, a zombie faction fighting under a name that has lost its meaning. And the blame for this lands squarely on the shoulders of one man, Roman Reigns. His journey as the tribal chief began with the psychological destruction of his own cousin. It was propped up by the manipulation of a loyal friend he never truly accepted. It crumbled when the family he belittled finally chose their own dignity over his authority. And it all resulted in a power vacuum that let a more ruthless version of his own ideology take over. Roman Reigns set out to put his family at the head of the table, but through his own hubris, paranoia, and tyranny, he became the very person who smashed that table to pieces. He wanted to be the tribal chief, but he ended up as the architect of his own family's downfall.